I have struggled for many years now with a deep sense of guilt for my strong dislike of meditation. Now I know this is almost anathema for a Unitarian Universalist minister, but I just have never enjoyed it, nor have I felt like I get anything useful out of meditation. Now, when I started seminary, there was a lot of pressure around starting some sort of daily spiritual practice. This, we were told, was what we needed to do. It was the key thing we needed to do in order to not get burnt out in ministry. And meditation, of course, was the most perfect practice of all. The practice that most effectively cultivated the presence needed to do this work and sustain oneself in the world. There was one class I took in which daily centering prayer was one of our assignments. Now, centering prayer is a Christian meditation technique derived from the practices of the ancient mystics. We were to do a certain number of minutes per day. I think it increased as the semester went on, and reflect upon the experience in a journal. It was pure torture for me. I tried, I really did, because I'm a very diligent student, and I had really bought into this idea that it was something that I needed to do to be a good minister. But I hated it. Instead of lowering my anxiety and helping me find the compassion and peace that I had been promised, it literally did just the opposite. Each minute that I sat there, my anxiety raised up another notch, and my shoulders crept up another inch toward my ears. And I ended each session a jumble of nerves, sure that this meant that I was never going to be a spiritual enough person to be a minister. And so, I always approach conversations about cultivating presence with trepidation, even when I'm the one supposed to be preaching on it. I think that we have developed a number of myths in our society about what presence is and where it comes from. So we picture the Buddha sitting under his Bodhi tree for years to reach enlightenment. That's what it looks like to cultivate presence, right? If I am able to notice each vein that runs through a green leaf, then I am really present in this moment. If I can sit for hours impervious to rain and wind, and especially to that inevitable tingling of a sleeping foot, then my spiritual center is clearly much stronger than yours. We've made presence into something that feels nearly unattainable for us ordinary people, something that only those great spiritual teachers can really achieve. And we've made it into something to achieve, right? It's one of those things to add to the list of accomplishments that we have. Here is my gold star for cultivating presence. And so I really appreciated hearing Harvard social psychologist Amy Cuddy's reframing of presence. She says, I really wanted to take presence off of its pedestal. I think that people see it as something that's not accessible to the average person, that it's something you get through lots of yoga retreats or a pilgrimage around the world, and it's some permanent state that you eventually get to at the end of your life. And I don't see it that way at all. I see it as momentary and fleeting. And of course, everyone has been present in certain moments and isn't present in others. So I wanted to break it down in a way that people could understand and harness. The way I see presence, says Cuddy, is it's the state of being attuned to and really able to comfortably express your true self. Your true self is your values and your beliefs and your skills, your passions, all of those things that make you, you. To be attuned to them and able to deliver them, especially under pressure, that's presence, says Cuddy. Presence is the state of being attuned to and able to really comfortably express your true self. Often, presence is defined as being in the moment or paying close attention to the present. These definitions often strike me as being too focused on a solitary form of presence. And so what I love about Cuddy's definition is that it is intentionally relational. Cuddy is focused on how presence works when we are in relationship with others, which we nearly always are. It's not so much about noticing each blade of grass as it is about knowing what is going on within ourselves so that we can be authentic and in the moment with others. It's similar in that way to the understanding of presence that we heard about in Nancy's Words for Reflection. Presence is the way in which we occupy space. Presence is about how we move through the world. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been noticing myself moving through the world in a bit of a funk these last few weeks. Everything feels harder than it should, and I get irritated at the most innocuous things. Since the election, it feels as though the world has shifted beneath our feet, and I'm not necessarily sure where I stand anymore. I wonder, what does this new world mean for me? What does this new world mean for us? On Tuesday, some of us gathered and watched the movie Defying the Nazis, The Sharps' War. This movie tells of the story of Unitarian minister Waitstill Sharp and his wife Martha, and their work to save hundreds of refugees at the beginning of World War II. The Sharps put their lives on the line time and time again with no guarantee of success. After the movie, we talked together about moral courage. Moral courage is often defined as the courage to take action for moral reasons despite the risk of adverse consequences. And we wondered how it was that Martha and Waitstill had such courage. We wondered what it was that moral courage might look like in our time. And we wondered if we would have the courage to say yes when the time comes. None of us could say for sure. It seems to me that there is a certain connection between the cultivation of moral courage and the cultivation of presence. Moral courage is also inevitably about how we move through this world. It is inherently relational, and it is about the ability to express your true values even under pressure. And I think that moral courage has been placed on a pedestal very similar to the one that presence occupies. As with presence, we have this idea that moral courage is not for us ordinary humans to access. When we think about moral courage, we often think about those great seekers of justice from our history. We point to people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela and Gandhi and Mother Teresa. And we ascribe moral courage to these people who we could never imagine ourselves being like. And so put it in that realm of unattainable attributes that we can only dream of achieving ourselves. And I think this is where my current funk comes from. I look at the state of our nation and the state of our world, and I'm not sure I have it in me. I'm not sure that I can muster the moral courage needed in a time such as this. I think about that story of Martha and Wait Still Sharp. When the American Unitarian Association reached out to ask them to go to Europe, they were not the first people who were asked to go. There were 17 people who said no before the Sharps said yes. And so I wonder, would I have been among those 17? Perhaps moral courage needs to be taken off of its pedestal just as much as presence does. Perhaps we need to begin to understand moral courage not as an unattainable mark of sainthood, but instead as a living out of our deepest values, even under pressure. Now, I'm certainly not going to stand here and tell you that either presence or moral courage is easy to attain. It's just not. These aren't attributes that just fall in one's lap. But I think they are within our reach. Each one of us has within us the capacity for presence and the capacity for moral courage. And it comes not from unthinkingly mimicking those famous spiritual teachers, but instead from reaching deep and living into your true, authentic self. Now, at some point in my journey, a mentor reframed spiritual practice for me as anything that keeps you grounded in your deepest sense of self and spirit. Anything that helps you show up with authenticity and compassion. And when I complained that spiritual practice didn't work for me, they had me name the things in my life that I was already doing to keep myself grounded and authentic. When I let go of the need for cultivating presence to look like something specific, I was able to embrace and nurture the things that actually worked for me. So every day now, I take a walk outside if I can, reminding myself of the beauty and diversity of this world that we live in. Once a week, I take a ballet class, grounding myself in my body and in the sacred practice of making lots of mistakes and still having fun. I make time for long conversations with friends, even when I don't think I have the time, knowing that those relationships keep me whole. And I try to laugh as much as I can with others, as a reminder not to take myself too seriously. So how do you cultivate presence in your life? What are those things that you already do that help you stay grounded and live authentically? We all have our own practices, even if we don't acknowledge them as such. And I wonder if the same could be said of moral courage. We all have our own practices, even if we don't acknowledge them as such. I doubt that Martha and Wait Still Sharp knew when they said yes to that first trip to Europe, or even the second and third trips, that we would be sitting here nearly 80 years later, wondering where they got their moral courage from. None of us know when the moment may come that we will be asked to say yes to moral courage. We may not even know it when it comes. All we can hope for is that when that time does come, we will have the presence to respond with authenticity and grace. May each one of us find the presence and the moral courage needed in a time such as this. May it be so.
Take time in life, take time in life, brother. Take time in life, take time in life, my brother. Take time in life, take time in life, brother. Take time in life, take time in life.
Take time in life.